It's important now when we're talking about visualizations, we're thinking about all the stakeholders as far as how will this be used? What will have the greatest impact for those who need to see the data? What is the best way to be able to demonstrate learning achievement so it doesn't just say pass and not pass? How can we uncover deficiencies that we don't normally see? The purpose of assessment is to expose both achievements and deficiencies that will inform decisions of how we can improve learning. At the bottom of this slide, you'll notice that there are multiple types of visualizations. The key is how can it be most useful to those who are going to be using the data when it's collected. That's where assessment really comes. Assessment isn't collecting data and creating reports. True assessment is looking at the data and making decisions from the data you've collected. That's when we begin assessing what we have. So let's look at some visualizations. Earlier, we talked about groups and outcomes on this administrative level. This becomes useful in visualizations. These are the groups: critical thinking, written communication, etc. This where multiple criteria are assessed. This particular page shows the aggregate, all the scores that are brought in all the criteria within critical thinking, within communication, and shows you the percentage of students that have achieved at each particular level. And this is useful up to a certain point. But when it becomes most useful is when we can break it down to the specific outcomes, the specific criteria that's within. Say, as in this example, this is separating out the criteria that were assessed. Now, if you notice in critical thinking, I'm going to go back one slide just a bit. Critical thinking looks like they're doing really well. There's 76% are meeting and exceeding expectations, which looks really, really fine until we separate it out. And now we recognize that, oh, there's an area where students are really not doing very well at. And the capability of developing a system that will expose the data that we can make decisions into how can we now improve this aspect of critical thinking, which is the influence of outside scholarship in decision making. So in other words, this disaggregation by criteria and being able to visualize in this way makes it extremely valuable. Another example that we quite often give programs is take all the criteria and we organize it by what the students are having the most difficult with on top, gradually to what they're most successful at. So then out of all the criteria that's assessed, they can identify that, at least this semester, students are having more trouble with calculation than they are some of these other criteria. And then again, exposing the challenges so we can go back and find out where do we teach this and in which courses might we make some changes to try to improve calculation skills. Some programs find it easier to see things in a graphic format like this, while other programs prefer seeing the data in a table format. This is exactly the same data, just visualized in a different way. The most important thing is we as our assessment offices can take the data that programs are collecting and present it in such a way that they can be able to see the components that they need to discuss, look at different levels of achievement by disaggregating all the different components. The nice thing about this, if it's collected through Canvas, all the faculty did was score in their class at the time when the students were demonstrating it. The next thing that they're going to see is this, or this, or this. In other words, all of this can be automatically imported into these structures without having to spend a lot of time manipulating it. The technologies that move into visualizations is where the true value comes to automating a data collection process. And if you want to look at it this way, what most of our faculty don't like about assessment, they don't like collecting data. They don't like having to go back to things they've already done and to do it again and to put it into a different format. They don't like writing reports. Then to have to send it to the program, like to look at data, which is about a year after where they collected it, because they're already doing something else. If the data can be put into this visualization reporting format nearly immediately, when they see this data, then they can talk about it at a time when it is most current and relevant to themselves. Here's an example that is used in the music program, and you could use it in many of the other programs where the same outcomes are taught and assessed across multiple courses, these cohort programs. In a music program, they have the students performing and demonstrating tone production, technical accuracy, etc. every single semester, and the scoring device that they use has a differentiation category that runs across 10 different levels. You might think of the first 3 levels being freshman level and et cetera, but you really think about it as competency level. So they can differentiate quality across the entire program of development and be able to visualize at what time do the students make the most progress? At what times do they plateau? That becomes valuable for some programs. Another valuable aspect to using Canvas technology, it's its capability to connect to other sources of data. I'm suggesting things like the student information system. All these universities, they have the information system of every student, what gender they are, where they came from, whether they're first generation, what major they in, did they transfer in, do they live on campus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We are connecting our Canvas data, which is on the right, to our student information on the left, and then we are able to use those to filter the data by gender or by whether they transferred in or not, or whether they live on campus, or what major that they're in, first generation status, ethnicity, whatever demographic you might want to identify cohorts and see about progress, and then be able to filter each of these. As an example, if we would click on transfer students here, now it filters out all the students who transferred in, and we see their scores in these particular areas, and you can drill down further to each of the criteria. So if we want to click on see all those who started on campus, we see that achievement is a little bit different. Now, when we drill down even further, we'll be able to identify in which criteria students are having more challenges. We're able to also drill down into the criteria. You could even drill down further into which courses did that come from. You might even drill down even further to say which assignment from which course. In other words, all that information is there. However far you want to drill down to be able to make this data useful, that's where the visualization becomes extremely important. Here's another example. This comes from an engineering program. This is an example from multiple choice questions that are happening across multiple courses. This identifies how many different students that are within the categories that they have defined. Looking at this particular outcome, which is communicating effectively, oral, written presentations, they also want to see what the students say about themselves in the student senior survey, and then what do alumni say when they look back upon their training in communication. And they also want to see what the employers, how they're scoring them in the communication skills. In other words, multiple sources of data, as long as they are using the same structure and the same category and the same definition, this data can be pulled together to be able to understand the contribution, that instruction happening across a curriculum. Here's another example that has been very useful with many programs. This comes from our College of Education, and what they wanted to look at is the difference between how well students perceive their learning as compared to how the faculty are scoring their learning. So they took the same scoring device that the faculty are using and had the students score themselves in each of these specific criteria areas. And then they compared the students' indirect self-assessment as compared to the direct assessment in the very same outcome in using the very same measure. And now they recognize in this particular outcome area, the students scored themselves 11% higher than the faculty did. In other words, the students are self-inflating their competence according to the rigor expected by the program. Or this other way around, when this goes down, the students don't recognize that they are accomplished as they're being scored. This gives the program additional information to recognize if students are overinflating their competence, then when they go out to be a teacher in the classroom, the possibility they go out and do something wrong is pretty strong because they think they're better than they are. So we need to address that, or the other way around. In some programs, in internships, they often have an internship scorer scoring them, and they have the faculty going out and scoring them as well. So they take both those scores and put them together, and now they can compare the difference between the internship scorer and the faculty scorer to identify the faculty are scoring them less severe in these particular areas than the internship director. So we maybe want to make a decision on, do we need to be a little bit stronger in our scoring, or do we need to communicate a little bit better our expectations? It doesn't give you all the answers. It gives you more questions by which you can look at your particular learning aspects. And this is all done by simply connecting multiple data sources together.